Out. Okay. So welcome everyone to this session at SEFI at Session Work, which is actually a reading session on the chapter 19 entitled Collaborative Learning in Engineering Education. This chapter is authored by Emma, Molly, Robin, and Preethi, who will be our presenters. This chapter, for information, I think you know, is part of the International Handbook on Engineering Education. And this session, as many others, you also are being advertised and be part of the coming weeks and past weeks, is aimed to disseminate the book, but also for us to learn a little bit more about each other, but also what is going on in the engineering education research landscape. I just want to make a note that in the next 2 weeks, on the 31st and the 31st of January and 7th of February, it's been a long week, sorry. We will have 2 more sessions which I will be moderating. So I would like to welcome again Emma, Molly, and Robin. They are from Illinois University, US, and Preethi is from the MIT VU University in India. I will leave to them to introduce a little bit more about them, their collaboration in their chapter. For now, I'll just give with a little bit of practicalities. We will have the authors will have 20 minutes to present their work, as I mentioned. For their information, I will give a 3-minute notice by raising my hand, if that is okay. And then it's 1 0, the minute number 0, I will clap. So you wrap up, or that is just to inform you about time, so you don't need to think about it. For the audience now, I invite you to actually write your questions and comments on the QR feature of this room, and once the authors finish their presentation, we will actually go through the questions and comments to warm up. But I also invite you to raise your hand so we start having a dialogue and conversations. So that's it from my side. Look forward for your presentation. The floor is yours.
Hey. Thank you so much. We're very excited to get to share this work with you all today. Everyone can hear me okay? And can see my slides? Okay, so I'm going to quickly, we're just going to quickly introduce ourselves and then give you sort of a brief overview of this work. So I'm Emma Mercier. I'm an associate professor at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign in the Department of Curriculum Instruction. My work primarily focuses on collaborative learning in classrooms and really asking the question of how can we make collaborative learning easier for everyone to implement. And so a lot of my work in the last decade has been situated in introductory engineering courses. Molly, do you want to jump in and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Molly Goldstein. I'm also from the University of Illinois, and I am
We can't really hear you, Molly.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm on a bus. Let Robin go next, and then I'll go. Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So sorry about that. I'm Molly Goldstein. I'm also from the University of Illinois, where I'm situated in the College of Engineering, where I educate large classes of engineers and also study their design behaviors and design actions. And sorry, I'm
Okay. Molly is on a bus taking a group of her capstone project students on a day trip of some description, so she will be in and out. Robin, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself too?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Robin. I'm a graduate student at the University of Illinois. Emma Mercier is my advisor, and the work I'm focusing on is like understanding collaborative learning in engineering context using multimodal learning analytics. So happy to be here.
Preethi.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Preethi Baligar. I'm the associate professor and the program head at School of Computing in MIT VPU, India. Most of my work has been in undergraduate engineering education, both practice and research. I basically focus on how to use cooperative learning strategies for educating students on engineering design skills. Yep. Over to you, Emma.
Thank you. Okay, so to quickly give you an idea of what we're talking about today, I'm gonna just hit on some of the highlights here. Why collaborative learning, collaborative or cooperative learning, and how those two things differ. I'm going to talk about the implementing collaborative learning in the classroom framework, and then follow up with that with the 4 T's of collaborative learning framework. And then Preethi's going to jump in and talk about future research directions in the field. So to start with, when we talk about why collaborative learning, and I think most of you here are here because you believe it's valuable in engineering, the research is pretty compelling that engaging in collaborative learning is helpful for students who wish to, or when we wish to have students persist in STEM fields. So we see a lot of the time, and I think we see this for 2 reasons, that minoritized students, female students, often drop out of STEM in the US. I know this may differ across your different contexts. But what we see when we engage students in collaborative problem solving is students feel like they belong. They recognize that other students are also struggling and that they're not alone. And then also a lot of the time, collaborative learning, cooperative learning is more project-based. So they start to see the purposes of the content that they're learning. And there's sort of the applied element of it really helps students remain engaged in the field. Obviously, from an educational standpoint, we like to see successful learning outcomes also, and the data is somewhat mixed on this, whether or not it really is better than just working alone, but there's certainly no harm for students. And what we see a lot of the time is students who would typically struggle do not struggle as much when they work in groups. And high achieving students, we see no additional benefit most of the time for working groups. We see no harm to them either. But for all students, and this may be the most important thing when we're thinking about preparing undergraduates, is that all students need to learn to collaborate. When they go into the workforce, we are seeing more and more need for group work, for teamwork. And we also see from the research that you don't just get good at working in a team by working in a team. You actually have to develop these skills. And so integrating collaborative learning activities into undergraduate programs allows students to develop those skills and be more employable when they graduate. And then finally, engineering education standards are sort of responding to all of these elements, but requiring obviously collaborative learning, project-based learning in many courses. As Molly will tell us today, she's off on her capstone project, and this is something we believe is important, but also responding to the American Society of Engineering Education's, and I'm blanking on the acronym right now. But this is responding to engineering education standards of having students have opportunities to engage in collaboration. But I think, I will also pause at this point to say, most of us have had negative collaborative learning experience. Most of us have students who complain about having to collaborate. And so it is really important that we don't just put students in groups. It doesn't actually work. It's pretty clear from the research that just putting people in groups does not lead to successful learning. And we need to structure the collaborations in a certain way that leads to all of these positive outcomes that we like to see. So then to quickly pause and do a quick distinction here. The terms collaborative learning and cooperative learning are often used interchangeably. And there's no reason not to, but I think it's valuable when we start thinking about how you're setting up a group activity in your class to really think about what you're trying to have students do. And so when you think about collaborative learning, in our chapter, we've defined it as the co-construction of knowledge within groups. So students are working together to build an understanding or to solve problems. And then we contrast that with cooperative learning, which is defined as groups where students have individual accountability for the group outcome. So sections of a task may be split up among students. It's not necessarily all students working together all the time. And we often use cooperative learning where expertise differs within groups. So this is really common in an interdisciplinary team. This is really common in the workforce, where you sort of have different people take different roles. So my final point is that roles are frequently assigned in the workforce. Of course, roles can naturally emerge, or you may have a leader of a team, and you may have people coming into a team with different expertise or different roles based on their position in an organization, or just their level of their content expertise or their skill set. What I think is important, and a lot of the time, from a research perspective, we either collapse these and we don't talk about the differences, or we suggest that they're very distinct. And I think when you're actually in a classroom situation, you're often moving back and forth between these. So a lot of the time when we design tasks that we might call collaborative, there may be a time where students are separating out to do different parts of the task and then coming back together to co-construct knowledge. So these two processes can co-occur and often do co-occur. So then I want to quickly move into the two frameworks that we use in this handbook chapter. And these are two frameworks, one of which was published in 2015 by Cecilia Kendler and her colleagues. And I was very excited when this was finally published, because it really was one of the first times that people really talked about, what is the role of a teacher? What happens in collaborative learning in classrooms? And what we see here is that they've broken up the process into three stages: the pre-active phase, the interactive phase, and the post-active phase. And one of the things I really like about this framework is that it has the quality of student interaction as the sort of core piece of it. This is what we're going for. This is what all the research tells us is important. When students have high quality interactions around their collaborative activity, their cognitive activity, and their metacognitive activity, we see the kind of outcomes that we want to see in groups. And so what this framework allows us to do is sort of take apart what is the role of the teacher to get to these interactions. And so here we see the planning phase, the first start, before you get into the classroom. We see the interactive phase, where you're monitoring the groups, where you're supporting, and then where you're consolidating. And this, I will say, the consolidating piece is perhaps one that is often forgotten when we're in a classroom. And that is that piece where you sort of bring the class back together and reflect on what happened in either that class period or over the course of the project, and really use those opportunities to consolidate the formal knowledge that students were developing or working on through their activities, their collaborative activities. And that is often that sort of very important piece to go from the sort of complicated conversations that students are having between them and allowing them to formalize their ideas and their concepts, and to really make sure that they understand what's been happening in their group work in terms of the course goals. And then finally, reflecting, and this is the one critique I have of this framework, is that they really don't bring reflecting into both the student and the teacher level here, because we know from the research that students reflecting on their group processes is really important for ongoing development of collaborative learning skills. So I would put reflecting in here also into the student level as well as the teacher level, but thinking really clearly here about what does it mean when you finish. All of us get, or at least I get to like this after I finish teaching a class, and I'm like, oh, I'm so tired, and I just want to forget that class happened and move on to whatever else is on my agenda for the day. Taking a few minutes to reflect on what went well, taking a few minutes at the end of the semester to like write up your notes, so what would you change next time? What are the pieces that worked? What are the things that need revision or that you need different attention to next time, is a really important element of all teaching, but in particular of collaborative learning. Okay, and then I want to move on. We're holding questions to the end, I believe, here. So let me jump into, this is a framework that I developed with my colleague, Steve Higgins, when working at the university in Durham University in England. And we'd worked for many years with actually 10 and 11-year-old kids in a classroom that we'd set up to really collect data on the collaborative learning that was happening in the classroom context. And so we came up with this idea of the 4 T's of collaborative learning, where the teachers, the teams, the tasks, and the tools all play into the successful learning outcomes. And just paying attention, the research in our field has often just paid attention to one element of these, and yet what is happening in every element of these pieces really influences what happens in the classroom experience, in the class experience, and in the students' learning experience. So thinking about how to construct teams, thinking about what is the teacher doing, what is your role in terms of supporting and removing scaffolds as the students move forwards. What are the tools that are going to be used to support the collaborative learning? What are the tools that are sort of key to the field that you're working in that students need to become familiar with? And then how do we design tasks? When we talk about this in our chapter as well, like the elements of task design that are really important for collaborative learning, and how we can move forwards to make sure that the tasks are truly collaborative or truly cooperative tasks, that they're structured, and that we're not just giving students like some open-ended tasks at the first time they engage in a collaborative activity and say, go do it, that we actually do provide supports and structures for the cognitive, for the metacognitive, and the collaborative activity. So then when we talk here about bringing the frameworks together, which I sort of talked about a little bit on the last slide, but the 4 Ts are going to influence the quality of student interaction. And this is the key piece when we're talking about collaborative learning. So each of the tools, the tasks, the teacher and the teams are going to influence how students engage collaboratively, how they interact with each other. Are they co-constructing knowledge? Are they really working to create and to solve problems together? Are they engaged in the cognitive activity necessary to solve these problems? And then are they engaged in metacognitive activity? Are they monitoring their own participation? Are they requesting additional information from peers if they don't understand what's being said? Are they able to really think about how the things they're saying are adding to or are removing the problem-solving processes that their group is engaging in? And so then I will ask you, when you're thinking about collaborative learning in your classroom, like how can you plan for each of the 4 Ts to foster each type of these 3 activities that you want to see? And obviously not every interaction, not every collaborative experience is going to have all 4 of these, but how can you plan for them? How will you monitor and support and consolidate using the 4 Ts? What are the elements of the teams that you can use in the consolidation activity? What are the elements of tools that you can use to monitor? And Robin's work has been looking a lot at this in recent years. How can you support and withdraw scaffolds from the tasks? Can you structure tasks in a way that support the development of collaborative skills over time? And then how will you use the 4 Ts in your own reflection and the reflection that your students are going to participate in after they have completed their activity? Okay, now I'm going to pass to Preethi, who's going to talk about future research.
Thank you. If you look at the next slide, we'll realize that we will realize that while there is a significant amount of research in collaborative learning, and most of it has also been translated into practice, which we see in engineering education classrooms. But most of the work there has actually been focusing on short-term collaboration projects among students. So now the further research is actually characterized by categorizing them into 4 quadrants: the teams, tasks, tools, and teachers, which we will be briefly touching upon in the next slide. Yeah, okay, thank you. Now, if you look at the team's perspective, as I earlier said, most of the work is concentrating on how teams collaborate in short-term projects, whereas there are lots of scope for looking at how this happens over a long period of time, an entire semester or a year. In fact, we believe that this also has an important bearing on how these roles and collaborative skills will translate into workplace competencies eventually. We also see that there is scope to identify how these collaborative skills develop over different phases of a project. If you look at engineering design, there is this empathy, there is conceptualization, there's solution development and testing. So across these phases, how do these collaborative skills develop? Which is that phase which actually contributes most to it? And what happens to heterogeneous teams? How does collaboration happen in those? And I also see that because we have different types of problems that engineers solve, so they could be having a bearing on how these competencies develop over a period of time. So if you look at the tools as well, you know that Robin has been working on leveraging technology in collaborative learning. So there's lots of work happening in multimodal data analytics. But at this point, I also want to bring to light about the PISA framework for collaborative problem solving, which actually leverages clickstream data to identify what great collaboration looks like. So you can actually refer to that work as well. It's available online. Lastly, using clickstream data, we can actually identify what are those success indicators of key collaborative solving competencies that happen. Yes, and if you go to the next slide now, the remaining two dimensions of the 4T framework fall into place. One is on teachers, in which there is lots of scope for work happening here. In fact, my own PhD work was about developing scaffolds which teachers could use in engineering design projects at undergraduate engineering level. So there's lots of work that we can think of doing in how to develop teachers' competencies for developing effective and efficient cooperative and collaborative learning classrooms. While we look at the final here is on the role of tasks, as I've been talking about it back and forth, you will realize that scaffolds are anything, maybe could be worksheets or task sheets or videos that actually help students tide over the difficult part of a problem solving process and take ownership of their learning during that process. So how do we develop these scaffolds? What are the key characteristics? Do these scaffolds actually vary across the different engineering streams or across the project phases? What are they? How do we embed these seamlessly into our learning experiences? So while there is lots of scope available on the 4T framework in line with the opportunities for future research. So I think with this, I have to end my contribution to this, and over to Emma. Thank you.
I have to unmute. Okay, thank you. And I think that is the end of our slide deck. So we're ready to
Then
open for questions.
Then I say that's only not me applauding, but everyone, please. Was very good. Thank you very much. I enjoy very much to also read your chapter. But I think your presentation gave more thought for food, because as usual, you can verbalize some of the things we read and goes a little bit further as well. So we have one hand raised and one question in the Q&A box. So we start with the question in the box, and then we move into the hand. Sorry, Umawati. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Otherwise, forgive me in advance. So, Paul, I would invite you to read your question, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, or whatever time frame you're in. Yeah, I was also interested in what you were talking about in the teamwork of how these dynamics that we're talking about are impacted when you have in interdisciplinary groups students from different academic backgrounds, like you have engineers maybe working with accountants, artists, people from social work, this kind of thing. I was just wondering if you had some sort of insights into how that differentiates, or whether what you were presenting was more related maybe to just engineers between themselves. Is there enough work maybe to do on that level already? What are the extra dynamics that maybe you have identified?
I can start off by saying I've done some research on interdisciplinary teams, particularly in the sort of computer science and education collaborations, which are where we're working with education students, computer science undergrads, teachers, or other sort of like a museum setting where they're actually working to create something. And I think, a lot of these principles are the same. It is more of a cooperative space, but then it really is going to depend on what your goals are. And so when I've taught these kind of interdisciplinary classes in the past, the goal is to prepare students to be able to engage in these collaborations in the future. And so for that, we really one of the outcomes that we seek is sort of a respect for each other's goals and an ability to really understand the processes, not to be able to do the processes that the other part of the team is doing, but to be able to understand them and to give respect for the time that it takes, the energy that it takes, the sort of the nuances and the things that are available. So it's a more delicate form of collaboration in terms of not what in terms of what your goals are. And so a lot of the time where we're trying to have people co-construct a project, and this is where I talked a little bit about like it's collaborative and then it's cooperative. So you want them to come together to create the project plan and then split up based on their expertise and then come back together and sort of have that iterative process where they're like, and obviously in the sort of, it can very easily become a situation where the education students are just using the computer science students as the developer instead of saying, oh, you're part of our team, you need to understand what our processes are. Or the computer science student can be like, well, we know what we're doing, so we're just going to go do it and we're not going to listen. So sort of developing that particular skill set of listening and respect for each other's skills. It adds an extra layer to teaching like that. That I don't think we really haven't touched on in this. I have a book chapter from 2009 that addresses some interdisciplinary elements of collaborative learning. But there's a whole field out there around the science of team science that gets very into a lot of detail around interdisciplinary teams. And then, of course, when we start to get into university collaborations and interinstitutional stuff, there's a really fascinating field out there around it, but plenty more to think about when you're instructing groups like this. And I can share that book as well if people are interested in. I can send it out the email list or whatever. I don't know if Molly or Preethi want to jump in here too.
Oh no, it was perfect.
Okay, so should we move to the next? Umawati? Sorry.
Hi. I'm
Hi.
Emma. I'm from Malaysia. So I teach project management for engineering students, and it is a collaborative work. Some of the so that's why I wanted to ask, what would be, and it's a semester long project. So, and there are these it's not easy. Not everyone can work collaboratively. So what are the scaffolds like I can prepare to make them work in teams better? I think that would be my question for project management, where they have to take up these different roles in a real project. So are there any scaffolds that I can do? These are undergraduate students who are in their second year. Yeah. Thank you.
Preethi, do you want to take that or?
Yeah, sure, I'll take that up. Thank you, Umawati, for this question. I can give an example of the scaffolds that we used in a project-based learning course at undergraduate engineering education. It was an interdisciplinary course, and when students developed a mechatronics prototype. So it was an entire semester course at first year engineering. So these students who are very fresh from their 12th standard don't really have any idea of what it looks like to work, to be cooperative and not competitive, right? So we dissected the project process into 4 phases. And at every phase, we identified what are those difficult tasks that students are going to face at that juncture, right? So the scaffolds are not very generic. They're very contextual because they have to be very contextual to the thing at hand, right? So for me, it was, we developed these scaffolds for the information gathering phase, then into the problem definition phase, concept generation, and solution development. So there's lots of literature on individual scaffolds at different phases. So we actually developed this entire for a set of scaffolds for the engineering design process, which also had a project, a 16 weeks project like yours. So I think from my experience, it is more required that we look back into ourselves and talk to our students, maybe through a qualitative session at the end of the semester, a focus group discussion or something, and ask them what are those difficult points they face. This is one source of information. Ask the faculty members where they spend more time with students in communicating the same thing over and over again, right? And third comes from literature. So I always look at it as a 3-dimensional thing. What are those tasks which the students are finding it difficult? One comes from research, obviously, because there's so much of information already out there, and talk to the teachers. So this could help you develop a clarity about where the problems are and what can benefit. And in fact, I also see an evaluation of this particular this thing over 3 dimensions. Actually triangulating the same thing from 3 different perspectives. What literature says, is it beneficial for students, and is it super good for teachers? So yeah, I will start off like this. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you very much, Preethi. We have one question in the chat, and then we move to Julie. Regina, can you ask your question, please? It's okay if the camera doesn't work.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's okay.
My question, I work at the university, a technical university in the Netherlands, by the way, and we do have a lot of group work, and the putting together the groups is always something very difficult. So I was wondering when you said, Emma, just don't put students in a group, then what do you mean by that? Because now sometimes I do it indeed randomly, sometimes I try to use some classifications, but I'm not sure if that was what you meant, or rather like put them in a group and then really, help them structure their work and support them, etc. So could you please elaborate on that?
Yes, and I definitely mean both of those. As I was reading your question, I was like, oh yeah, yes, absolutely. The second part, don't just just assigning students to a group project is not enough. You have to support them and do all the rest of it. So that I think is clear from our presentation. Group assignment is really complicated, and I think you will agree, kind of a hideous task. And the research on this is very complicated and unclear, I think, partly because there are so many elements to take into account. So I think, one of the things that, like, if you're doing small, short activities, we often move to having the same groups for multiple weeks, so students can actually start to get to know each other and feel comfortable. Sometimes it's really tempting to just randomly assign students, mix up the groups, give them all the time, and I think, allowing them to sort of understand that creating a safe space, thinking about psychological safety and concepts like this is really important for a group, even if it's just short-term tasks. So we're not just sort of asking them to collaborate with strangers repeatedly. And then I think for longer-term groups, I've been working with colleagues in computer science around team assignment for the last couple of years, and I don't think we're any closer to a good answer to this. I think there's a lot of sort of really mixing the practicality of allowing students to form groups based on availability to meet outside class. Like some of the ridiculous practical things, like if people's schedules don't overlap at all, then and this goes a little bit to Paul's question about interdisciplinary teams. If they have to be able to meet outside of the classroom. There has to be some fundamental pieces. I think the work on whether or not students were friends before or after hopefully they're friends after, if they knew each other, if they were socially connected beforehand. I think some of the research indicates that it's productive. I do think we also see a little data out there that says they don't push each other as hard, that they're more likely to be accepting of ideas, and sort of more friendly instead of sort of challenging and really truly engaging in the cognitive elements of the task. So it's sort of, you're kind of making decisions on every time. We do know the research is fairly clear that putting minoritized students alone in a group can be difficult. And so you may want to put multiple students from the same minority group into a group together, so that you're not the only female in a group of male engineering students who may historically be ignored. But yeah, there's a lot to unpack, and I don't have a good answer other than saying we have been working on having students have some input on what the criteria are. The team have been using CAPME, and so having the students participate in that has allowed them to feel more ownership of it and understand that this is not just purely random, and that's been helpful. But this is horrendously complicated.
I agree, but thank you for your answer. Really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Yeah. Hi, thanks a lot. Yeah, my name is Julie Direnga. I'm from the University of Bremen in Germany. And yeah, thanks for your talk. I was wondering about your answer, Preethi, to the last question. If you could suggest scaffolds for a project-based course. You said it was highly context dependent, and I agree for some type of scaffolds, but I could imagine that there should be some general type of scaffolds that always work, and maybe just forming the group in the team building process, helping the team to specify their goals, and maybe just getting to know each other, talking about their strengths and weaknesses. And maybe their preferences in like how they want to organize the work, their norms of working together, something like that, just to help them with these kind of processes. Do you have any specific ideas that work well in your experience?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Julie, for the question. You are right when I said these scaffolds are pretty much specific, but I was very unidimensional thing I gave. When you look at, there are two kinds of knowledge that are required for a team to work together: teamwork knowledge and task work knowledge. This task work knowledge is very specific to the competency, the knowledge and skills for the task at hand, right? So if you look at a task work knowledge for a medical professional or engineering student, it's much different, right? So if a law student, it's much different. So there's lots of literature on task work knowledge as well. But if you look at a generic teamwork knowledge, in this case, we're talking about collaboration, cooperation, you're right. We have lots of scaffolds coming into place, and these scaffolds, they not only help us in as icebreaker or planning, monitoring, and the evaluation phases. Because if you look at the planning, monitoring, evaluation, they are pretty much context agnostic. These three tasks. So you're right in saying that we could be developing, but there are lots of scaffolds, Julie, in this. They're available online. If we look at my specific case, we had the scaffold for a teamwork activity, this ice-breaking thing when we brought students together, try to do a SWOT analysis of their teams, and then identify who's good as what. A SWOT is it's not T, but a C, a challenge. So we did this one. So a team kind of comes to a consensus of what their weaknesses are and where they want to work and things like that. But again, when they looked at these weaknesses and challenges, they kind of tied this down to the task at hand. So while we have the generic things, but eventually students, they will tie it up and look at it from the lens of the task that they have. So yeah, that's where I come from right now.
Okay, thanks a lot.
More questions? I have a lot of notes.
There's another one. There's a question from Catherine Luby in the chat. Do you see that in the Q&A?
Can you see me?
No, I haven't. I haven't not.
Let me read that for you, Aida.
Oh, sorry. No, it's because it doesn't come. I'm sorry, Catherine. It doesn't come down. I have to click. That was the problem. Sorry. Yes, please, Catherine, go ahead.
No, it's probably the $1 million question. When you're doing group work, like I do find that, say, the sort of higher achieving students do most of the work, and how do you engage the less motivated students, or do you have any tips like that to get all of the, like they can hide a little bit in group projects, if you know what I mean? And have you any ideas on that?
I'm going to suggest Preethi take a first stab at that? Because the cooperative learning has a lot of structures for that, and that's really her area of expertise. And I will add some tips after.
Yeah. Sure, Emma. Thank you for this question. If you look at cooperative learning, there's lots of work available on the 5 principles, you know, the interdependency, promotive interaction, and so on. So when we look at teams which have a very heterogeneous mix, I mean, where a couple of students are academically less motivated, so we see that structuring roles, there could be different roles in there. Structuring these roles generally help these students focus on the task at hand. So, and there's a principle of interdependence where there is goal interdependence, task interdependence, reward interdependence. There are like different forms of interdependence that can bring these people together. While we are trying to work on the technicalities of team and how they interact, but how much they will interact is eventually left to their motivation, right? So if you look at the theory of expectancy value, and the one that works on motivation, there are so many there are so many principles available wherein we can actually work with students to develop their motivation. So I think the first task for us would be, while as teachers we work at one level of making sure technicalities of team formation, team structuring, you know, individual and team assessments, all of these are put in place. We also have an opportunity to look back and sit and say, okay, what is it that makes these students be motivated? Right? So the expectancy value theory gives us these opportunities to think about it. Sometimes, why am I here in this? Because I see that this has a personal significance for me. So it's a personal framing of it. Some students frame it academically, some students frame it extrinsically. So I think there's literature available on how we can do this, you know. Ask students a pertinent question about why they think they are there and how it will help them in their future. So maybe then they intend to connect to it.
What is this?
But having said this, I guess I always
Did you
take
grade
a horse
yourself?
to the water.
No, I was folding, so I was making a dragon. Okay, I think I aced the exam.
Have to
I knew
mute
everything
someone.
on there. I say Alhamdulillah.
Cannot see.
Alhamdulillah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Adir Hadim. La ilaha illallah.
Tanvir,
Yeah, okay.
Tanvir.
But-
Hello, Tanvir. Your mic is on and we can hear you. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah,
Yes.
thanks, Preethi. Yeah, I suppose with my students, like I see that it's always grades. If they get the grades, that's the only thing that can motivate them. And I don't know if you're the same, but I'm from TU Dublin actually, but we find nowadays a lot of our students are working. They have part-time jobs massively, much more than in the past, and they're always juggling and just barely, you know, a lot of them are just barely doing what they need to do to keep above the pass mark. But that's, I suppose, another story. And I have a fun fact, actually, Emma. My father went to the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana in 1967. So I thought that was amazing.
Well,
Anyway.
well, I grew up in Dublin, so
Oh, did you? All right, very good.
I was just there visiting my family last week. So I was sort of hoping this call would be last week, so that time zone would be slightly easier. I will say one of the things, and particularly answering that question of how do you manage when students don't have a lot of time outside of class, is sort of structuring time within the class for group meetings, and having, you know, we often do call on students, mostly in the interdisciplinary teams that I've been working in, to sort of say, you know, you all need to understand the processes that are happening. And so that like, if I ask you a question, you have to be able to answer it. Part of your term grade is going to, like, everyone's going to be asked at some point over the course of the semester, and you have to know what the status is of your project. And so that's kind of it feels awful to be forcing it at times, but you kind of have to, and then sort of, and giving class time over to group work and being able to drop in and see what's happening, and is everyone participating? Is everyone, like, are they having their needs heard? We also do a lot of, and Molly and I have been working on a project looking at check-ins over the course of the semester, having feedback so that students can you know, do peer evaluation of how everyone's contributing, and so that, like, collaborative learning takes a huge amount of effort on the faculty member. I'm often really I'm very clear with students about that. Like, you might not think I'm doing a whole lot of teaching, but I'm doing a lot of teaching in terms of monitoring and making sure and checking in. And then if a group is reporting that someone is not putting in the amount of work, addressing them with it and saying, like, what can you do? Because part of your grade is based on this work. What are the things, like, can you write down what are the things you're going to do between this and the next check-in? Can you tell us what you're going to do? Are you then look back and see, have you done them, so that you are actually making that progress. But yeah, it's not easy, and I think Preethi brought some really good theoretical ideas to it, and then the stick and the carrot piece. How do you make sure and keep track of it? But yeah, those class sessions where I'm like, I don't have a whole lot of prep work to do before the class time, but I'm so exhausted at the end of it when I've been paying attention to everything going on in the group. It's sort of if your schedule works out like that, we get to schedule our classes in 3-hour blocks, which help a lot for that kind of activity.
Yeah, thank you very much, both of you.
Yes, I hope I haven't missed anyone now.
There's one.
Yes,
Did we
please.
hear from Paul Jones? There was a question in the Q&A blog.
Yes, was the first one.
Yeah, it was the first question.
Now Paul
Yeah,
raised his hand again. So please, Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, it was just because we've been talking about these kind of like, I mean, obviously in the collaborative learning, there's kind of the end result, you know, that they've got this problem and they have to define it and all the rest of it. How do you actually, we talked about grades as well. Catherine talked about grades. How do you have any tips for kind of like the assessment of the process, for example, that, you know, Emma was talking about the sort of, you know, checking in and keeping track and things like that, which are more maybe on the sort of soft skill end, maybe, or the teamwork, which you talked about, teamwork knowledge as opposed to task work knowledge, because maybe it's easier to kind of talk about, you know, evaluate task work knowledge because kind of like it's more technical and hard skill, and yet teamwork, we're kind of going into the more sort of soft skill end. I wondered whether you had any sort of ideas or sort of tips about that.
Emma, shall I go after you?
You can go first if you want.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Okay, I get. So yeah, certainly, as I talked about, making it really explicit as a learning outcome, and then having students set goals and reflect on those goals during their process. A colleague, Marcela Borge, has been doing some really interesting work in online environments where she's having students engage in collaborative discussions and then actually look at their discussion and identify the quality of their interactions that are going on using a framework that she's created, and then sort of say, okay, we didn't do so well in this section, in this category, how can we work on that next time? So having very successful experiences when you're explicitly having students engage and reflect, you know, be aware of what happens. And so, you know, this goes back to the original question, like just putting students in teams, setting it up to say, these are the skills you're going to be working on today. And we've sort of sometimes in our, we had a long-term project, and it was one of my goals to really get to it and to sort of have the teaching assistants who were teaching the classes sort of identify a skill that they wanted students to work on from day to day. But then sort of say, like, you know, I want you to work on active listening today. I want you to work on like making sure that you follow up what someone says with asking them to elaborate, or negotiating the meaning of what somebody is saying. So be very explicit in the skill set that need to be developed. And while assessment of that is difficult, I think you can then have students engage in self-assessment and sort of recognizing that perhaps the grade is for engaging in the self-assessment process and sort of, you know, being critical of themselves, showing, you know, and again, multiple time points so they can say, I'm not doing so well on this. This is what I'm going to work on. Did I work on that? Am I doing better at it? So that it's an individual individual goal setting for what they want to be successful at, or with their team wants to be successful in, and so that's sort of making it that the purpose of the task is not just to solve the problem. And this actually harks back to my dissertation work, where I looked at learning and achievement goals in groups, and sort of seeing, do they have learning and performance goals? Carol Dweck's achievement goal theory. Do they have a performance goal? Is the goal to get the best project they can, or is the goal to learn the most from the process? And sort of thinking about how you're setting up their goals for the task and allowing them to understand that it's the process that's more important than the product. And if they can reflect on that throughout, it's not easy. And grading that is many times all the students in my classes get A's because I'm grading your effort. I'm not really grading them. And I've had, when I talk about stuff that they test out in classrooms at the end of a semester, sometimes it doesn't work, and it's kind of it has to be okay for your tool not to work on the last day. The question is, have you done all the things along the way to get to it? And just because it's hard to get learning that's developing software for a group of kids it's whole different, that people are actually going to use, is a whole different process. Preethi, did you want to jump in on that too?
Yeah, sure. Yes. I just want to highlight a part of what Emma said. Working on the process is more important in teams at times. When I look at the process, if I and you are conversing on an issue, right? If I'm agreeing with you on everything, it means I'm not really contributing in a critical perspective of a team member. But probably if I'm asking you follow-up questions, it means that I've understood what you've said. I'm trying to build over it. Second level. But the third level would be, yeah, I've understood what you've said, and here is probably a gap in the solution, and this is what I propose. So you see, when I look at the process, it has 3 levels. So, but assessing this is not that easy. As Emma said, we could go on self-assessment, peer assessment, how they've been contributing to the various ideas bouncing off in a team. But yeah, it's again pretty much qualitative, I must say, this perspective. Because if you don't have clickstream data, if you are collaborating online, and most of these conversations happen offline. So it looks like a peer assessment could be one way of looking at it. And at this point, I also want to fall back on the concept of reward interdependence and cooperative learning, which I see it as the rewards come at 2 levels, at the individual level and at the team level. So you see, that's how it works. So team contribution could mean X points, and individual contribution could mean like Y. This kind of motivates students to do it. But yes, I've worked on it. It kind of worked for me. Yeah. So you could as well look if this works for you.
Thank you very much.
There was another hand raised, but it was Regina, but I think Regina.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, thank you.
To finalize quickly.
Yeah, I wanted to react on Catherine at first because so how to involve all students in the group. And I wanted to share that we use also some peer review system, and the peer review is on the cooperative work, so on the cooperation. And we use that twice in a quarter, in an education quarter, and it helps the students to understand what is expected from them by their peers. And also we share the results with the student mentors and with the teachers who are monitoring their progress. So it is really used in different ways as a signal, not like someone has a lower grades in this peer review, so we give them a lower grade, but it's just as a signal, like you are not working to the level that we expected because of this or that, and that's really helpful in getting these teams work together in a good as possible way. So I just wanted to share that because I didn't hear anything about this, I believe. So yeah, it does help.
Thanks very much, Regine. Thank you.
Any last points from the authors? 1 minute before I close the session. No? Okay, so so thank you very much I'm thinking about here how to close the session. I actually challenged the audience to put one word or a sentence about what they have learned here today. But well, I can tell you that I learned a lot because it's one of the first times I actually see a very comprehensive paper with a lot of references that can actually build cooperative, collaborative, what are the different frameworks, and so on and so forth. For me, that I teach in a problem-based, project-organized environment, and I train the students with how to thrive in this environment. This is also very inspiring for me. And I have just some pointers for the authors and for the not pointers, that's not the correct word, some reflection, some reflective notes. One is the intensity of group work and the spaces. We haven't talked about intensity of group work. If it is a semester, 16 weeks, where actually half of the grade of the semester is on the project and their collaboration, that has a huge toll on the students, I can tell you. And also within 16 weeks, they have their own group rooms, they have their own spaces. So where are their spaces in big classes, one moment in time, or actually there's a continuation as well. So I think this intensity of the group work, for me, actually kind of hit me as we were talking, because in some moments I found my experience a little bit different in that way. I also thought about the longitudinal approach. So like the micro as one moment, one task that is cooperative, but then the meso that it can be on a long, but also on the other semester, and then on a macro level at the workplace. So how this evolution happens in the students from first years to actually when they get into the workplace. And I don't think there's research on that because it's a very, very difficult research to do in a way, but it would be very interesting because their personal experiences first determines the way actually they see group work when they get in. It also what is the values they hold, and then how that actually changes throughout their experience with others. And one of the pitfalls I have from my first year students is that they think that everyone behaves like they do when they start university. And they don't. So it is also very interesting to see this change. And I like very much the frameworks, but I wonder if the planning could also be constructed between students and teachers as well, and the reflection the same way. And that's also an spiral process. So I didn't ask questions, but I have all my notes here on I reflect on it. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure to learn from you, also know more about your work. I've been working with Preethi, so we know each other and facilitate groups together. So yeah, but it was a pleasure meet the others. And also thank you for the audience for the questions. And that's it from my side, Clara. And I've been sharing things in this chat, just yeah. Yes.
Is there an easy way to share our slides with people who've asked for them? Is there?
Yes, you can send them over to me, and I can forward them to the participants.
Okay. Perfect.
No problem.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, and wish you a good weekend.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
weekend.
Thank you
Bye.
for coordinating.
See you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye bye.